Hey guys, Sam Miller from Panel Precision. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Okay, in this week's Straight Talk, we're going to talk about the cold bore shot and the Perfect Zero. Okay, this episode stems from an email that I got from a guy the other day who was asking me if I included the cold bore shot in my load development testing for my new comp rifle. And the short answer is yes. Everything I do about shooting and long-range shooting and precision shooting revolves around long-range hunting. That is my motivation, is to be able to take a perfect shot on an animal at a long range and make a good hit. So, you know, when I lay down and shoot groups prone, or when I check my zero or things like that, I am very aware that that very first shot has to be the best shot I take that day, and that's how I approach it. Now, as far as what would I do if my rifle didn't shoot into the same point of impact with a cold bore shot as it does with the rest of them, I really don't know what to tell you. I've never had a precision rifle that didn't. So, you know, I saw somewhere where a guy posted in a forum or something where he was saying that it most likely isn't a cold bore problem, but rather it's a cold shooter problem. And I can tell you that if you're having problems getting that first shot into the center of that bull, or at least into the center of the rest of the shots, maybe you should back up for a second and have somebody watch you or video yourself while you're shooting to make sure you aren't screwing up, because it happens to everybody. Another thing you can do is hand your rifle off to somebody that you trust and have them take a cold bore shot, and then follow on with a group and see if that group with the cold bore shot duplicates what you're getting. And there is no substitute at all for a lot of data. So, you know, don't jump to a conclusion until you've seen it over and over and over, and you're confident that that's what's going on. I keep a lot of targets. I keep a lot of notes. I write down things on targets. If I messed up and flinched and I know it, I'm going to write it on that target, because, you know, if you're not honest with yourself, then you're just hurting yourself. So, you know, make sure you have a problem before, make sure your gun has a problem or your load has a problem before you start coming apart at the seams trying to fix something, when it could just be you not making that first perfect trigger press of the day. The other part of this is a question that I've gotten a lot over the last several years, and it has to do with you know, how precise, how accurate do I need to make my zero? I try to get it right on the line. So if you watch me shoot or see pictures of any of my targets or anything, you know I like those Leupold targets with the 1-inch grids and then a 1-inch circle, or I think it's a little bit smaller than 1-inch circle in the middle of it. There's a lot of different targets you can use. Use whichever one is more comfortable for you to use, but that's the one that I've just kind of said, this is the target I use now. But anyway, when I check my zero, that circle, the first shot has to go into that circle. And the closer I can get it to the center, the better I feel about it. It's not that I need that kind of accuracy usually, but it's a big confidence booster when I see that first shot split those lines. It doesn't happen all the time, and it's not because my scope's moving around or my load's bad or my bedding's off. It's because I can't duplicate it usually. But I know when I'm on and I know when I'm off. So when I'm shooting very well and the light conditions are neutral and there's no wind, there's no mirage, there's no environmental factors that are going to send that bullet or send my perceived view of the target off the center. I know I'm capable of it, I know the gun's capable of it, and I know the scope's capable of it. So, you know, it all comes down to, how do I have the gun in my shoulder, how am I looking at that target, and how am I pushing the trigger straight back? So when I'm checking my zero, I'm making sure that that first shot is perfect. And if it's not, I stop everything I'm doing right there, I walk away from it, and I come back and try it again, because I don't want to adjust things in my scope or in my load or in my rifle that are my fault, because I'll just be chasing my tail, because the next time I go to check that zero, it might be where it should have been the first time before I adjusted anything. So I'm very hesitant to change anything on a rifle scope load combination that has already been proven to perform well. Now, I keep some of my targets, a couple of them I keep up on the safes on a magnet, but this is an example of, you know, good precision and accuracy. So that 5-shot group, not only is it small, but it's right in the middle of that circle. So that'll work for me, obviously. This is another one, and this is on a long-range hunting rifle. This is the Canyon rifle. So this is the kind of rifle that I need to hit that shot with the very first shot. There is going to be no follow-up, and I need that kind of precision to shoot small targets at long range. Here's a couple. This one could have been adjusted a quarter minute down. Am I going to touch it? No. You know, either that's me or that's something I can't adjust, and quite frankly, I'm not worried about it. Another example of that, it could probably move a quarter minute. Am I going to touch it? No. That's plenty good enough. And then if you look, I keep notes on my targets. Sometimes I'll write down which one was the cold bore, and then I date it. I keep track of what different loads do in different rifles. So this one was a different load that I tried without touching my zero. Holding on that bowl, and you can see where it impacted, and you can see where the next 3 shots impacted with the MagnetoSpeed bayonet. So that's another thing. If you're using a MagnetoSpeed, your zero can shift. Typically what I've found is that zero will shift up, so the point of impact will be up rather than right in the middle. Some rifles don't do that. The comp rifle I'm shooting right now seems to have if not perfect, a really close point of impact with the MagnetoSpeed bayonet on, which is kind of cool. And a lot of times I'll just take one shot. I'll just say, I'm going to go check the zero on this gun, and I'll lay down, I'll take one shot. And if it hits the center, I walk away from it. No reason to add in something that, you know, maybe you screw up the next shot or the next 2 shots. Just leave it alone. And if you do that often enough, over and over and over, you'll get confident in that gun, and you won't even think about it anymore. Now if you guys see me shoot groups, this is what I do. I aim for the center, and then if my target is plumb, I'll just start running right and left, up and down with my next series of groups. And that lets me shoot on one target and check the scope out a little bit. But the first shot's always the one that matters. So here's another one. I remember shooting this one because the night before I was out shooting my 260 at some really stupid distances, well beyond what it's really capable of. I was over a mile with it, and I had my Nightforce NXS maxed out to the top as much as I could give on it. I have a 40-minute rail on that gun at the time, and I was holding the extra elevation I needed with the reticle. It was really crazy. I mean, the bullet was completely subsonic, and they were bouncing off the dirt all around this 1-minute rock I was trying to hit. But anyway, I ran it back to zero, to the zero stop, and then the next day I went out and shot at my home target. I hung this target up and shot 3 shots with that zero, and that's one of the big reasons why I shoot Nightforce scopes, because they track where you want them to go and they come back to zero every time. And that rifle and that scope came right back to zero. So here's one that's off a little bit. Would I touch that? No. That was obviously me doing something with it, or me, when I looked through the scope, my perception of where the target wasn't exactly accurate. And that's another thing. Learn how to run the PA knob on your scope, learn how to adjust it, and make sure you have it right before you do any kind of 100-yard work, because it is much more important to have your parallax perfect on a high-power scope at 100 yards than it is to have it perfect at 1,000 yards. Here's another example of checking things. That first shot was with the muzzle brake off of it, so it was just an open muzzle shot, and then I screwed the suppressor on to see where the suppressed shots hit with the can on the barrel, and that's where they hit. So I would note that somewhere and know that that's my offset. Now if you're running a Kestrel, you can actually use the Kestrel and put in an offset so that when you scroll to that gun profile that you're using, it will just come up as a 0. I don't ever use that. Usually I just tape it on the side of my stock with can on, add 2 minutes elevation or something like that. But here's an example of 2 different loads that don't shoot to the same 0 but are close. If you want to run 2 different loads in your gun, you don't have to change the 0. You can just offset the 0. So you put that on your stock. 130s, I need to come down and left. Here's a different barrel with a suppressor on it, and you can see it doesn't impact as far down as the other barrel did. And this was on the Terminator, the first year I ran the Terminator. This was at 610 rounds, and I hadn't touched the scope other than to take shots at long range. I hadn't touched anything on the zero since about the 30th shot. I'd figured out which bullet I wanted to use, I figured out what load I wanted to use, and I left it alone. And that was at 600 and something yard, or 600 and something rounds down the tube. That's just a zero and accuracy check. Anyway, the whole point behind this is to keep track of it and be hesitant to move things. Be hesitant to, you know, open up your scope and change the zero stop and change the zero on it. Make sure you have a reason to do that before you actually start making a mechanical change to your scope. Okay, so yes, the cold bore shot is the most important shot I'll take, and I do count it in everything I do, whether it's shooting groups or making sure my zero is spot on. You know, I'll go so far as to hang a target, shoot at it one day, come back, shoot at it again, come back and shoot at it again 2 or 3 days later. And those 3 shots, if I shoot 3 of them, will be more important to me than any 10-shot group I'll ever take. So some of the things that help me if I'm having problems is video myself. I like to video myself, just put the camera right on my face and on my hand and just let it run. Don't even think about it, just let it run. And then go back and watch it later and see how my form was. Did I keep my eyes open, you know, when I was getting ready to shoot, and then right after the shot? Would I have been able to see the impact on an animal at 1,000 yards or 600 yards or 400 yards, which is way harder? Did I slap the trigger? Was I breathing right? Did I breathe in and then out and let it pause? Was I relaxed when I broke the trigger? The biggest thing I'm guilty of is my breathing. Every time I'll catch myself breathing in and out and in and out and just breaking that trigger all over the place. So I don't need to video myself anymore doing it. I know I'm doing it, but anyway, that's something to look for. Another thing is dry fire. Obviously, you're not going to dry fire when you go up onto a stage when you're PRS shooting. You're not going to dry fire before you're shooting at a deer coming across your line of sight. But you can dry fire before you shoot groups. You can dry fire before you check your zero. And what that does for you is it tells your brain that, hey, I'm doing everything right and everything's working how it's supposed to before you induce recoil and blast in the equation. If you have any trouble at all, just go back to dry firing again. It will tell you, number one, if you're laying down on a bag in a bipod or on a bench with a couple of bags and the crosshair doesn't stay right where you want it to on a dry fire, then you have something you have to fix before you start shooting, because when you broke that trigger and felt the firing pin slam forward, that's when the bullet would have taken off out of the barrel. So if the crosshair didn't stay on the target, you have to fix that. You have to remedy that before you start sending bullets down the barrel. Keep a lot of notes, write down on your targets, write in your load book. You know, all this felt good, but my group was still off center. Or I know I pulled a shot, I know I had mirage, I know this, I know that, so disregard this and don't change anything. Try it again the next day. Things like that. And if you change your zero, if I change my zero, I write it down in my load book or my log book. Change zero, up, half, right, quarter minute. So that if you see a pattern, you know, where you adjusted that, and then the next time in your load book you see, well, wait a minute, I just adjusted it back to where it was before. You know, it's obviously something you're doing if you do that. But anyway, that's my take on it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.